Good afternoon. Welcome to Freedom Deals Live. So this is the first session we've done in a few weeks. I've been overseas for a couple of weeks, so thanks for your patience. I had a wedding in Switzerland, which was absolutely phenomenal. I've come back nice and refreshed, and batteries are recharged, and enjoying being back at it. So for those that are new to Freedom Deals Live, what do we do in Freedom Deals Live? So Freedom Deals Live is about closing a gap or filling a gap that I saw existed when I started development. So I've been developing now for over 10 years. This is what I do full time. And when I got started, one of the most difficult things that I found was how to build my skills of assessing sites. All right, what do I look for when I go to a site? It's all well and good having the dream to do property development and create wealth through real estate. But then I would turn up a site and it's like, well, I don't know what I'm looking at. What am I looking for? What are the opportunities? What are the risks? I had no clue. And same thing when I'd open up a spreadsheet. I don't know, what numbers am I putting in the spreadsheet? Someone's provided me with a feasibility template, but I don't know what these things cost. Same thing when I was looking at plans, for sewer and water. It's like, I don't know, what am I looking at? So that's what the point of Freedom Deals Live is to fill that need, I guess for lack of a better term, is to give you the ability to go to the gym, so to speak, and do repetitions of looking at different sites, learning to know what it is that people like myself look at when we review these sites and decide, is this something we are willing to spend or invest potentially millions and millions of dollars in, or is this something that we should just push off our desk and move on? Because what does become incredibly important if you are serious about this is the ability to decide whether or not a site is worth investing your time in or not. Because what catches out a lot of people when they get started is they spend weeks on one site. Weeks. It's not possible to succeed in this if that's what you're doing. You cannot spend weeks and weeks on every single site that you have a look at. It needs to be a case of most sites taking, probably not at the beginning, but most sites taking a minute or two, 5 minutes max, when you have a look at it to decide, is this worth spending more time on? And then, yes, fair enough, if it passes that first screening, then you might spend hours, maybe days, but very rarely do we ever spend weeks on a particular site. It's got to be looking pretty damn good. So that's the point of this is, hi, Dragon King. What's your real name, Dragon King? That's the point of this, is to help you get access to the ability to go to the gym in terms of assessing sites, the ability to do lots of repetitions and get good at it so that when you do make that choice to invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, that you can do it with confidence. Okay, so that's the point of this. For those that are new to it, I run this. Thanks, Austin. Good to meet you, mate. For those that are new to this, I run this typically every Wednesday. Not religiously every Wednesday, but most Wednesdays I run this. It is a free session. If you do want access to the library, which is full of hours of these sessions and also masterclasses and all those sorts of things, I don't offer coaching anymore, but I do provide that library. Hey, Mick, good to see you, mate. You can get access to that on a very cheap subscription, but these sessions I run live and I run for free. So take it and run with it. I encourage you to get the most value out of it. Engage. If you just sit and listen to this, that is entertainment. That is not education. You're going to get educated and you're going to get good at this if you actually engage with me and try and anticipate what I'm going to say or what I'm going to look at. So already you guys can see my screen and you can see what is on there. So be looking at that while you're listening to me and start having a look to go, all right, if this was my site, if I was considering investing millions of dollars, what should I be looking at? Okay, so Mick, I know you've been looking at plenty of these, so I expect some things from you these days. For those that are learning and brand new, there's no silly answers here. Just throw it out there. See whatever comes up for you, whatever you notice on here, and question it. Go, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that a risk or is that an opportunity? Okay. Now, the really cool thing about this one here is, so this I actually have under contract at the moment. This is a live deal. So for those that are new, again, these are real deals. I either have them under contract, or I had them under contract, or I've already bought them, or I've rejected them, or they're a site that someone I know has done or is doing. So these are real deals. These are not manufactured. Every week, And sometimes I'm looking at these for the first time with you. I have my team doing this full time. And basically for these sessions, I go to Michael, who's my team, and go, hey, what's an interesting one you've looked at recently that we can do for the session? Or it might be one that we're currently working on or just bought. This one, I actually learned something from. I mean, no matter how long you, it stopped streaming for you, Roland. Is anyone else having problems with the streaming? Roland has just said it stopped streaming for me. Anyone else? So yeah, if you can let me know ASAP if you're having trouble with the streaming. So you never stop learning in this. There's never a point that you realize. And Jonathan, not sure what that means, Jonathan. But if you ever reach it, you're never going to reach a point. Right. Thanks, Jonathan. You're never going to reach a point where you know everything. So you're always going to learn. But on this one, it was actually a fairly big learning in that this particular zoning is something we have looked at for many, many years. And we've been looking for a way to actually use it. And the answer has pretty much always come back going, no, there's nothing you can do with it. Typically, it's a zoning that is designed for high rise, really high density. So in terms of land subdivisions, it just wasn't really a usable zoning. And then what do you know? All of a sudden, there is this site that is DA approved and for sale in that zoning. And we're looking at it going, how? How has that happened? We've been trying to do this for years, and all of a sudden someone has done it. So I tell you that to have you see that even after doing this full time for many years, you never reach a point where you stop being surprised. There are always going to be people that figure things out before you. So I'm going to share that with you today because this was a really cool learning for us, regardless of whether this site is a success and it goes ahead. We learned something out of this, which we will use in the future. And you really need to look at this whole journey in that mindset. Give you another example. When I first started out, I went on a blazing trail of optioning all these properties when there was this rezoning. I spent thousands of dollars, which at the time was a lot for me. I didn't have much, okay? And I spent several $1,000s optioning these properties. I spent many, many hours, creating these relationships and prospecting to find properties to put under option. I got 3 under option. I put together what I thought was a really quite a good site. And then I discovered that, nope, it was absolutely pointless. Interestingly, it was the same zoning because what I didn't understand at the time was that the values in that area were not high enough to justify building multi-story residential. So you could say that I wasted thousands of dollars and I wasted many, many hours. But what I learned during that time and what I learned about options and how to do them, because it's one thing to understand what an option is, it's an entirely different thing to have an intimate understanding of it and have used it. That knowledge that I gained from that, I've used on many deals in the future that have culminated to millions of dollars in profit. So had I stopped, yes, I wasted that money. But I didn't stop. I kept going and I used it as a learning. So take that mindset on your journey as well. Okay, let's have a look at this. So this is a DA approved 1:4 subdivision. And you are reading correctly in that this block here is 180 square meters with an 8.9 meter frontage. This is a 161 square meter block with an 8 meter frontage. 161, 8 meter frontage. And then we have a 474 square meter block on the corner. Now, this is the first time I have seen this done in this council area. All right, so this is significant because whenever you see a change like this, whenever you see something shift, that creates opportunities for a number of reasons. But if for no other reason, because there is always a lag in people figuring it out. So as an example, this got DA approved. Now there's one person that knows about it. Okay, well, in that one moment, that person has an edge on everything else because they can go looking for all these other sites that no one is looking at in that way. And then 2 people find out about it, 5 people find out about it, 10 people find out about it, and it continues. But in those early days, there is a window of opportunity where no one else is looking at the sites in the same way as you. And this is what I'm always talking about. You want to find that competitive edge because if you can be looking at a site in a different way, the conversation shifts away from it being a price argument. And that's ultimately what you want to achieve. If you are just competing on price and viewing properties in exactly the same way as everyone else, how are you ever going to buy value? Okay, so that is the first thing. So the zoning for this one is called urban, which is a high density zoning and typically is utilized for things like multi-story residential. But in this particular case here, it's not my DA, so I can't claim to know it intimately. I didn't go on the journey like these guys did. But what they will look at in these situations is also the average density here as well as in that area. So because with certain zonings, they'll have a minimum and potentially a maximum density as to how many titles effectively or how many dwellings per hectare. And so they will have had to have ticked that box in order to achieve this, this subdivision. And I'll flick us over to, all right, so this is the satellite view. And I remember, guys, especially the guys that have been doing this for a while, don't wait for me to ask the question. Start anticipating what we're going to be looking for. Start putting in the comments what you're noticing, what you think we should be looking at. Any observations? All right, pretend that this is your site and you are analyzing it. Okay, so what do we got? We've got a corner site. Corner sites typically are very favorable for development, right? Because you've got more street access. Because if you think if this had another block here, how do you access this available land in the backyard? You can't unless you can do a side access, but even then you've got limitations. Whereas when you've got side access, bang, 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 you can just add driveways to the side. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, this is a pretty significant thoroughfare here. It's not exactly a back street. I don't typically like that. I try and avoid those with developments, but let's continue on for this for the moment. Okay, so let's have a look at street view as well. Contours and services, Mick, good question. Let's have a look. Now, with these sorts of smaller ones, often you can get away or you get enough information from the street view in terms of contours. Because ultimately all you need to know is how you're getting a legal point of discharge. How are you getting the water off the site? Okay, so let's have a look. So this is the site in question here. All right, now looking at this is higher than this. Okay, so we know the water is flowing down in this direction towards this road. Okay, so that kind of takes care of things in this direction, but what about back to front this way? All right, well, let's go have a look over here. Yes, another way to do this would be to look at a contours map. One of the things that you'll find with the contours maps for a lot of the smaller stuff is sometimes the contours aren't actually big enough to give you a clear picture of the contours for that site, because the free contours may be like, 5 meters. So you only get a line when the level is 5 meters in difference, which when you're looking at 800,000 square meter sites, you want to hope that you don't see 2 lines on that, because that means it's a very sloped site. So if we're looking from this direction, it looks like it flows. This is the high point, and then this is the low point. So that street is sloping down there. So that's a challenge, because, and it looks like it's pushing more this way than that way. So getting water off the site, that raises a question about that, which I will admit I knew ahead of time, because that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. Okay, so let's have a look at some services. Okay, so we've got stormwater in the street. You don't always have that. That's a bonus if you've got it. And it looks like there's a pit right here, or a manhole. There we go. So curb inlet. We look at the actual key. That's always handy. So we've got a curb inlet here. So that can open up options with stormwater, potentially, and different areas will have different rules around this. But potentially in these sorts of situations, let's say it slopes from here to here and you had no way of getting the water off without filling. Maybe you can put a drain in the back and then pipe that to that inlet, depending how low it is, because this will probably still be lower than your point over here. Is a possible solution. I'm not saying it works in every situation. I'm not saying it works or is accepted in all areas, but it's a possibility. Okay, so that's stormwater. Let's have a look. Water and sewer. Guys, what do you see? For the guys that have been doing this a while, there's definitely a few things that should pop up for you here. Now, just a refresher, remembering that it looks like the land slopes high point to low point, so sloping left to right, and high point to low point, sloping from here down to here. Okay, so does that create any challenges for water? Does that create any challenges based on the sewer location? You tell me. Also noting that we have a light blue line down here, which is a trunk main for water. And the dark blue line being reticulation main is the dark blue one here. For those that are new to us, that means this is pressurized. All right, so this light blue pipe is under pressure. This reticulation main, as the word reticulation alludes to, it's just flowing. It's not under pressure. Well, not pressurized, naturally. Flowing down a hill creates its own pressure. Is the sewer uphill? Water looks fine. Sewer means easements through the properties, which sucks if they're tiny blocks. Plainly said and potentially true. So let's have a look at that. Now, water. Water, I agree. Perfect. Because water can go uphill because there is still pressure in these lines, even the reticulation lines. So water, bang, 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 we get our connections nice and easy. And based on its location on the dial before you dig, it looks like it's in the footpath. Remember, dial before you digs never rely on accuracy for actual location. But typically when it's like this, that means it's in the footpath. So water looks good. Sewer, okay, question mark, because we know that that is the high end of the site. So that means the sewer for the existing house here and these ones, the new blocks here, all need to flow to here. Now, how do we know is that going to be a problem? Well, we need to know the depth of that sewer. Because if, let's say, there's a meter of fall from here to here, but that sewer is, say, 3 meters down, it doesn't matter, right? Because here, it's still 2 meters higher than the sewer over here. So that's something we would need to know. Now, you mentioned about easements. All right, so easements are an interesting thing and dealt with differently in different council areas. So one rule does not fit all. And to make it more interesting and more, let's just say it's more interesting. More interesting is that the utility providers sometimes change their mind on that regularly. So in this particular area, this utility provider used to require easements on all services for sewer. So basically, if there was existing sewer or you added sewer, they required a 3 meter easement over that utility. Now, recently, in the last couple of years, they have become inconsistent with that. They have changed, it appears, mostly to a situation where they are no longer wanting easements over existing infrastructure, only new infrastructure that you build. Okay, so why is that significant? Well, that means that if they continue on that line, that there would not be an easement over there, which you are right, on an 8 meter wide block, a 3 meter wide easement would make that very challenging to build on. But if we need to extend sewer main across the back here to service these blocks, that still means that there's still going to be a 3 meter easement across the back. Now, if we look back at the size of the blocks, what's the depth? So they're 20 meters deep, which means there is a 17 meter usable situation. But then you've also got your setbacks at the front, which I'm pretty sure in this situation would be 6 meters. So you've got 11 meters of building envelope depth, potentially. So one thing is for certain, you're definitely going double story if you're building anything on this, which was a given anyway, realistically. But so, you know, yeah, very tight, very tight. And actually, when you look here, so that's actually got the sewer location plotted there. So it's not as close to the boundary as the dial before you dig suggested. So if that was to have a 3 meter easement on it here, well, there you go. You can see that that's 2.5 meter wide driveway. Looks like it's at least a half meter off there. So 1.25, 2.25. So it's already 2.25 off the boundary, plus another 1.5 meters into the boundary. That would really interfere with the usability of that block. So fortunately, apparently these days, no easement over that one, except you would need across the back. Now, here is a draft civil drawing. And this is actually the first time I'm seeing this one. So you get the full unscripted discovery session. All right, so here currently, overhead power coming in here, sewer here, water. All right, so there's the stormwater line to the pit. You got water, you got water. Oh, here we go, existing water meter. Sorry, very small print on which I could zoom in, that'd be helpful. Okay, let's see, anything else we need to see on here? Existing concrete footpath needs to be noted because any damage we do to it, we need to rectify. Yeah, good observation there, Roland. So the existing house uses the existing sewer, so it is likely deep enough. Yep, good observation. All right, so you can see here that what they've intended here, future building envelopes. So they've put the building envelope over the sewer. So that's telling you that it's, basically they're expecting to build over the sewer. Typically, when you do really small blocks, they ask you to show a building envelope, and they may even require you to provide plans for the house because they want you to prove that you can actually build something usable. Okay, so here the idea is you can actually still build them separately, but technically, often you'll sell those to or option them to the same builder, and they'll effectively build a duplex there, pardon me, but on 2 titles. Interestingly, sometimes still a gap down the middle. All right, now they have not included there. What I'm looking for is, have they done any designs yet for where they intend the sewer to run? All right, now this is interesting. Localized retaining to base of new perimeter fence, if as required. So they're indicating retaining along here. Okay. All right, that's the end of the plan, which is interesting. So what's the, so what I'm asking in my head is, what am I missing? How are these being serviced with sewer? All right, so we've got green buoys for electricity at the front. We've got our water here. If any of you are seeing something I'm not seeing, please tell me, but currently I'm not seeing how these are actually being serviced for sewer. Now, just while I'm thinking of it, I'm looking at this going, all right, what are the alternatives here? Would it be better to run the sewer across the back, or would it be better to run the sewer across the front? My answer there is, where's the greatest setback? Where's it going to have the least impact? Because if it's deep enough, then you could do it at the front or the back. Given that you've got to have a 6 meter setback from the front anyway, my thoughts is that it would be better to run it across the front. Now, my engineer may disagree with me on that, and I'm going to obviously listen to my engineer, but that's just the thoughts that are running through my head at the moment here. Oh, here we are, proposed. Okay, we've got a key for proposed sewer line, but tell me if you're seeing it, because I do not see a proposed sewer line. I mean, that's the existing sewer line, but I see no, oh, I lie, here we are. All right, clever solution. So what they're saying here is put a manhole in the footpath and run an extension of the sewer through the footpath, so that way you have no easement on the property. That's a smart design. What I don't like is the extra manhole. Although actually you would have had to do that regardless, I think. And then the hands and connection there. So look, that is an expensive sewer setup. Sewer is going really old school, flow to the street. Oh, look, that doesn't necessarily mean it's old school. I mean, ultimately sewer, it has to go downhill. So then it's a question of where can you put it to have the least impact? And the footpath, definitely the least impact, not necessarily the cheapest though, because your chances of being interfered with here are higher. And maybe it means you need to rip up the entire footpath and put down an entirely new footpath, which I'm going to say in this situation is highly likely. So that's always things where you've got to weigh up what is the benefit and the cost. Are you better off having an easement on the property? Which, look, I'm not entirely convinced that that's the best option, because it is going to be expensive. You're going to have to do new footpath, potentially other clashes with other services. You've got 2 street trees here, which is talking about as well, which then you've got to get permission to remove those. You've got to replace those. So there's a lot of messing around on the footpath, whereas you've got to be off the back boundary this much anyway. Now, I get that they've probably chosen to do it this way because then that leaves this back section open that you could still have a little shed or whatever. Truth is, like, in that scenario, when they put the sewer there and then they say, oh, there's an easement there. It was a joke, Roland, thanks. Most people are still going to put a little garden shed over the top of it anyway and just roll the dice, because the chances of Unity Water ever wanting to access it are slim to none. So, yeah, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the best outcome. All right. Let's move on from that. What else have we got in the dial before you dig? We've done water and sewer. Gas, I'd be surprised if there is any here. No. Telstra, don't care about because, well, interestingly, did we see an NBN? All right. For whatever reason, there does not appear to be an NBN dial before you dig, but I'm about 99% sure that there would be NBN in this street. But on the very strange scenario where there's not, there is Telstra, but I would be shocked if there was an NBN. Okay, so bottom line is we have a property that is serviceable. It's already DA approved, which significantly de-risks the property or the deal. The thing that is definitely odd, I would say, and the biggest question mark I have is the stormwater, because the block very clearly slopes towards the back boundary and then towards the main road. So the question is, how is the water getting off the site? And then they've also got on there the possibility of retaining at the back. Now, why is that a red flag for me? Typically, if you've got to do retaining in earthworks to fill a block to create a legal point of discharge, it requires an operational works approval. So that's one thing it's just a bit unusual in that regard. And then also to have to fill and retain that property, it's very expensive for such a small deal. Anyway, let's have a look at it a bit further. Questions so far, please just put them into the comments, or any thoughts you've got along the way. Okay, so again, first time I'm looking at this as well, so we get to go on this journey together. All right, so my acquisitions guy's put in 13 months. Why has he put in 13 months? Because it's DA approved already. So what do we got to do from here? Well, if there actually genuinely is no operational works approval and genuinely no earthworks required, then from here it should be pretty quick to get on the site and get the work done. And there's not a lot of work. You got a sewer, you got a water. In this council area, Unity Water themselves is going to insist on doing all of it, because they have to do the live connections. They may allow you to do that extension on your own and then they do the live connection. Pardon me. Question mark on the stormwater and question mark on the need for retaining and fill. But really, if it is just water and sewer and some concrete driveways and footpaths, it's bugger all work to be done. Like, that can be wrapped up in a number of weeks. In which case, 13 months is probably overly generous. But let's leave it at that for now. So we've got a total number of 4 lots. Ignore the buy price at the moment. Okay. Actually, no, don't ignore the buy price. The buy price is 1.2. That's what it's under contract for. Ignore the yield because that is not complete yet. Okay, so sewer, we've had an estimate done of 17,000. Actually, you know what? I'm going to say that he hasn't had an estimate done because that to me seems too cheap. And why does it seem too cheap? Because we've got to do 2 manholes. So the 2 manholes alone are at least 10 grand, I would say. So to me, I think that is light on for the fact that we are extending the sewer. What was it? I think it was about 30 meters. And he's done 40, but I don't think that's enough. Water 16. Well, on the positive side, I think that's probably over the top of what's needed there, because we're literally just talking standard connections bang into the front. So that somewhat balances out this. Stormwater, so he's gone connecting to an existing gully pit, installation of gully pits. Like I've said, big question mark there. Power and telecoms, expensive one. We've got design and construction required because we are doing underground power on the footpath there. So that becomes quite expensive. Underground power, same sign, design and construction required. Yep. I'm going to say I think that's a bit hefty. I don't think it'll cost that much. I think he's probably overcooked that a bit there. House demo, no. We're retaining the house. Erosion sediment control, new crossovers. He's put in figures there. Earthworks, just made a general allowance there. That's not enough to actually do any genuine, like, proper fill and compaction. He's put in an allocation in for fencing, and then he's allowed for some escalation in costs. That is just a generic thing that is built into this spreadsheet because when these were all done, there's been some CPI increases since then. So really, we need to increase the numbers in the back, but just haven't got around to it. Okay, so we've got all of our normal costs here, except we don't have any DA costs, which is always nice. Council headworks ×3 for the 3 new blocks. Everything here looks pretty stock standard. And then we've got our legals and our sales commissions, 2.5% plus GST. Original estimate was 880 for the house and 390, 420 for the blocks. Quite staggering that you are now paying 390,000 for 160 square meters in Burpengary. It's like 2 years ago that I was selling 260 square meter blocks in that area for about that much. Actually, yeah, I guess kind of, yeah, it's all a bit crazy. Okay, finance-wise, he is allowed for an interest rate of 7%. For anyone getting into projects now, I would definitely be bumping up your interest rate a little bit because I think it's pretty well written in stone that we are going to see further interest rate rises. And I certainly wouldn't be skimping on your costs because there's very high likelihoods. I was at an industry breakfast yesterday, which confirmed all of that too, that highly likely to be seeing inflation on the costs of construction again. Has already begun in many cases. So 80% lend on the purchase, 7% interest rate, hasn't allowed anything for an investor interest rate. So the assumption there then is that either I'm funding it or I've got a JV partner who is providing that all and sharing in the profits. Now on these numbers here, it works out at 20% and $327,000 profit. But we've since inspected the house, and it is definitely not an $880,000 house. Definitely not. I think if it was 790, I think that's probably optimistic, but let's just work with that for now. Okay, so at that point alone, that has us at 15%, which is no good. Now, some would argue here that, well, it's DA approved, so it's lower risk, it's a faster time frame, so a lower ROI could be doable. I don't entirely disagree with that. I wouldn't suggest that for your first project, just because in your first project, there is always going to be so many things you didn't know. So you're going to get hit with those things. It's going to happen. Me being an experienced developer and with a decade of it under my belt, I could potentially make an educated decision and go, you know what, that's fine. And the smarter way to make that decision would be not only to have an ROI requirement, but also have a IRR calculation rule as well. For those that don't know what IRR is, it's internal rate of return. ROI doesn't account for time. So if you invest $1 million and you get a $200,000 profit, that's a 20% ROI. Now, if you do that in 12 months, cool. You got a 20% return on your money in 12 months. If you do that over 10 years, that's terrible. So what if you made a 20% ROI? It was over 10 years. So really, you made less than 2% every year. So that's the thing with ROI, is it's assessing the deal on its risk in that moment. It does not allow for time. Internal rate of return is looking at what is your annualized return of your money, which you don't necessarily need to complicate things with that early on, because for your early deals, you should only be doing deals that are going to take you 12, 18, 24 months at most. Keep them simple. As you get into longer term deals and more deals and bigger deals, internal rate of return definitely should play a part. And as your investors get more sophisticated, that is the number they will focus on, because they're going to be going, well, if I keep this $1 million with me and I reinvest it into my business, I might be able to make 25% on it. So why would I give it to Peter if his ROI looks great, but my internal rate of return is 15%? They're not going to. They're going to want to see that their internal rate of return is at least equal, if not greater, to what they can do with it in their own business. So in this case here, maybe you could argue and go, oh, well, DA approved, can be in and out in less than 12 months, 15%, not too bad. But the thing that is still very much I'm not comfortable with at the moment is that stormwater situation. The stormwater situation, to me, has a big fat question mark on it, because typically with a block sloping in that direction, you would not be getting away without earthworks. In this council, I can only speak for this council specifically. So to me, there appears to be a risk that you could go through this process and then, even though really they're not allowed to, then go, oh, we stuffed up, we can't give you plan sealing because it's not compliant for a legal point of discharge, or it doesn't, So yeah, there's a grey thing there. So that, in my mind, requires a lot more investigation, and I'd want a lot more certainty over, one, even though they shouldn't, could the council still pull us back on that? And then all of a sudden we've got an extra 50 to 100 grand in cost in retaining and earthworks and compaction. That's the biggest risk I'm seeing in this at the moment. So if it was like simple as, and I thought I could be out of this in 8 to 10 months, then maybe I'd be okay with 15%. But I'm going to want a lot of certainty around that stormwater situation before I potentially consider that. All right, questions, guys. You've been very quiet for a while. What are your thoughts? If this was your deal, would you do it? As it is right now, knowing no more information, would you do it? If so, why? If not, why not? Let's see it. I want to see where your minds are at, because look, I ask these questions and I expect the answers from you for a couple of reasons. One, because getting your mind into that pattern is what needs to happen to really get value out of these sessions. The other thing is it also tells me where you're at. It gives me an idea where your thought processes are at, so then I can tailor the way I talk about these things to give you what you need. Can the council revoke a DA on any grounds? Not that I'm aware of, no. So no, I'm not aware of them being able to revoke a DA. As far as I'm aware, once you've got a DA, that is tied in with legislation, and they can't revoke the DA. Now, I still don't take comfort in that, because the thing is, the council still needs to approve everything that goes on from there. So they still have, should we call it, under the table ways of causing you grief unless you give them what they want. And I'm currently dealing with another situation with a utility provider where it is an absolute abuse of power. It is completely inappropriate what they are doing. I would go so far as to say, in some way, criminal what they are doing. But the question is, how do I hold them accountable without spending $200,000-300,000 suing them? That's always the question. And unfortunately, they know that that is the question. So that's one of the troubling things with institutions and government organizations is they are the ones that write the rules. And yes, they are guided by legislation, those sorts of things. And some of them take that seriously. Others, unfortunately, do not. And there is always a significant cost to holding them accountable. Got to resolve the stormwater before it's acceptable. Yeah, definitely. Too big of a risk. Because look, again, I don't know the exact contours there, but just with the cost of retaining alone, knowing that, even if there's minimal fill, you're probably talking at least a $50,000 exercise. could be a $50,000 to $100,000 exercise, which, you know, if you throw that into the mix, then, all right, let's have a look at what that does to the ROI. We'll just put it in here. All right, now you're talking an 8.5% deal. And if any of you are sitting there going, yeah, but it still makes 140 grand, dangerous, very, very dangerous. Because here's the other thing too, which, so where are we at in the market? Well, it doesn't matter what you look at in the market. It's now like I've been talking probably for 12 months, actually longer than that, a few years now, about the 18-year cycle and its forecasted peak in 2026. Now, I've also said that doesn't necessarily mean that in 2026 we would see, oh, we've had a peak and now there's a downturn. That's not how it works. But as in that can be where the peak of land is, and then there can be a few years of hurt and pain after that, because as the value of land decreases, then you get a disparity between levels of debt and the underlying asset and a number of other things. That's only one part of it though. And everything at the moment is falling perfectly in place with the way 18-year cycles typically operate. And now even our local statistics and the things that are happening locally with increased interest rates, looks like the return of inflation, increase of costing, construction costs. We've just had the federal budget last night as well, which, you know, some interesting things in there. So, you know, I think we're on borrowed time in some markets, not all markets. That's one thing for sure, not all markets. So in Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth, where we've been running hot for a couple of years, I think we're very much on borrowed time. If we haven't seen the peak, I think it is very, very close. Sydney and Melbourne, that have been much more subdued over the last couple of years, different situation entirely. So not all markets are equal, but in those that have been running hot, where there's been this situation where you could buy anything and sell it again for a couple of months later and just make some money out of it, I think those days are either gone or very close to being gone, and potentially gone for several years. So, you know, for those that are getting into this, don't take that as discouragement, because if anything, operating in that is a better place to start. You know, it's I know that might sound contrary to what you might dream of, but learning to develop in an easy environment is possibly the greatest curse that can happen to you. Because if you learn under those conditions, the habits you form in those conditions may very well send you bankrupt later on. If you learn to develop in more challenging conditions, you'll find you'll learn it just as simply. But then when conditions go good, you get the cream from the better conditions. But you've learnt the skills of how to develop and how to operate in tougher conditions. So that's, I guess, my way of saying is don't be discouraged by that. I'd say see that as an opportunity for, all right, well, if I learn how to operate during these times, that's going to set me up very well for the future. So why do I say that? Is because, all right, the numbers we're working on there will vacant land when the market pulls back, and particularly with the amount of inflation in the pricing of land in affordable areas over the past 2 years, and I would say the artificial inflation of the pricing because of the government grants, they will be the ones that react most likely the hardest. You know, when that rubber band flings back, I think that is where the greatest hurt will be felt. So if these blocks can be sold for 390 today, well, maybe in 6 months we can only sell them for 350, and that can happen very quickly. Let's have a look at what that would do. We'll knock that back to 380 or 370. All right, so I've taken 50 grand off each of those. And for the house, because it's an established house, I'll just take 20 grand off it. Not great. Okay. So actually, one thing I want to just check there. Oh, that's because I got rid of that 100 grand charge. I was like, that didn't change enough. We add back in that stormwater, which is now looking at apples and apples. Yeah. Uh-oh. Yeah, that can happen very quickly. That being said, a comment worth saying, and I agree entirely with this. So I went to an event yesterday where Michael Matusik was speaking, and if you don't listen or if you don't read Michael Matusik's stuff, I would recommend that you do. Very data driven, and very much finger on the pulse. And over the years, I've found his material very, very helpful of seeing what is coming over the next 12, 24, 36 months. And his view is that with a lot of things that are happening, that small is going to be where the opportunity is. From even if we ignore everything else, from affordability, because if interest rates keep rising, which everything suggests that they will, then people that could afford $1 million property can no longer afford $1 million property, and it starts pulling that back to that entry level thing being back to where it was, which is $700,000-$800,000 packages, which, based on the price of land now, that's not possible in most situations. So either the land price has to come back drastically, or we need to be cutting up into smaller blocks and providing a smaller product. Now, some people will scream from the roof about that. And to you, I would give you a virtual slap in the face and say, wake up. Look at the rest of the world. All right. In Australia, we live in this bubble where we think that we are entitled to 1,000 square meter block with a big backyard, 250, 300 square meter homes, all that. That is a load of nonsense. We have the largest houses in the world. In the world. That is insane. That is excess. That is excess. That is not a need. That is not something we are entitled to. That is a luxury. So, our parents didn't grow up in that. That was not normal in Australia 40 years ago. It was a 3-bedroom home with 1 bathroom, 1, maybe 2, 2-car garage was seen as a luxury. So this ideology that we've got where that is the normal and that's what we should all be entitled to in our first home is a load of nonsense and needs recalibration. So the idea of, and if you look at Melbourne and Sydney, our oldest areas, like terrace homes were the thing even back then. So there's a disconnect there in terms of what we want versus what we need. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, or a lot of the opportunity will exist in these smaller spaces moving forward. One, because it's actually what we need. Might not be what we want, but it's what we need. And that is going to answer the affordability question a lot more. So that's my 2 cents worth. I may do a little bit. I might run a separate session, maybe not. I haven't decided yet, but obviously we've had the budget come out. I'm going to be meeting with my accountants tomorrow to go through it in detail to see how that's really going to impact things. Unfortunately, in most cases, as these things tend to happen, I don't think it's necessarily much help in there for growing wealth. Even the things there that are suggested to help won't. And if they do, it's short term, not long term. So unfortunately, as usual with politicians, it's, I believe in general, a very short-sighted budget, but let's pull it apart in detail and have a look at it. Either way, those are the rules we've got to play with now. So there's no point, sitting and moaning about it. Those are the rules of the game as of now. So let's figure out how to play with them. All right, guys, that's the end of it today. If you've got any last questions, throw them in the comments. For those watching this later, feel free to throw your questions in the comments and I will come back to you on them. Obviously not instantly because I won't be there live and I don't check my socials every single day. So I'll come back to you when I see it, but I will come back to you. Otherwise, thanks. Good to be back and I will see you soon. All right, noted, Mick. Keen to hear my take on the budget. All right, look, I'll either, maybe I'll run a separate session or maybe I'll just tie it into one of these sessions. We'll see how we go. I'll see how much I think there is to unpack after I go through it in detail tomorrow. Thanks, guys. See ya.